because we all know what a mother is supposed to be like. A good mother is selfless, her entire identity consumed by her love for her child. She is immaculate. She is youthful, innocent, almost virginal in her purity. Her hair flows behind her as she walks through a field of wildflowers, breastfeeding her baby. She always smells of freshly baked bread. She wears long cotton dresses and no makeup. She glows with love from within. She never questions her life. She feels eternally blessed and complete. She has at least 3 children for whom she is the primary caregiver. She is thin, attractive, and stylish. She is never stressed, never angry. She overflows with compassion, joy, and endless emotional resources. She is a mother and nothing else, and that is more than enough for her. And she is happy.
This is such a apt, like these two movies are such an apt case for our In Their Shoes project also, right? Like, because if you look at these two characters, this is an experience which we may never be, like, experience in our, like, these are like, this is something which we may never experience in our life, right? But it is such a universal experience. Like, your immediate family members, your mother, your partner, your friends, who have gone through pregnancy, childbirth, and all that, go through all these feelings. Like, what are the thoughts that they are having? What is that they are dealing with, that they are struggling to articulate, communicate to everyone? And what is that thing like? It's so sort of witches. Like, we'll start talking about witches straight away, and then sort of dive into Salve Maria. But which is, like, in the beginning only it talks about, right, like the term which women, like, it's how it is dismissed sometimes for women, right? Like, it is called as, oh, you are having the baby blues. Like, this is how, sort of you trivialize, because for women, it's a significant life event, giving childbirth. You can imagine how monumental it must be. And then when you're going through these feelings of, like, you know uh, postpartum depression, anxiety, mood swings, like energy drain, your eating and sleeping patterns are, like, going off the charts and all that. So, and then when you are, like, going through all that and dealing with the psychological issues also, which both these films beautifully, will dive into that more. But when you just kind of straight away say, like, how it has been done over a period of time, and which is straight away dives into, like, hey, it's just baby blues. No, there's so much more to it. And then what I feel, what Witches does beautifully, the filmmaker, it's made by Elizabeth Sankey, and it is kind of, she was trying to tell her own experience of childbirth, because she was finding it very hard to deal with it. She went into the psychoanalysis ward over there, right? Like, which is for, like, for women who are struggling, who are having mental health illness around uh like pregnancy and, like, childbirth and all that. So she takes her baby there, like, she tries to document that entire experience. But she also documents that experience while she is telling her story. She also interviews a lot of other women from her support group, the friends that she has made along the journey, the friends that she made in the ward. And another thing which she beautifully does is she captures, like, the film feels like a video essay of all the moment, like, scenes from popular films, from mainstream movies, from ads, TV series and all that, like, which sort of kind of, depict in a good way or a bad way, for a lack of understanding, this subject of, like,
Yeah.
how women dealt with childbirth and all that. So yeah, your first thoughts on the film?
As you were talking there about how, a lot of women's experience are kind of dismissed,
Yeah.
especially with pregnancy, because it's something that men don't experience. And it's kind of the expectation is that you must have a child and continue the generation, and women have to do this. So any cry of help is kind of dismissed. And I was thinking about, and this is not entirely connected to this experience, but just in general, like, women experiencing an emotion, if it's a feeling, if we talk about it like, oh, this is an emotional reaction, it's given less value than an intellectual conversation, right? Whereas I actually think that the intellectual conversation is the one that's trying to catch up to the emotion. Like, the emotion is kind of the
Yeah.
dominant force that dictates and should dictate how we feel. It's not wrong to let your emotions guide how you feel. And
Yeah.
the intellectual conversation is actually trying to make sense of all of this, right?
Yeah.
It's actually a tier below in many ways. But we've kind of rewired it to be like, don't be emotional and don't express how you feel and don't go through
Yeah.
all of this pain. Whereas, and the dangers of doing that are very clear in a documentary like Witches, because it's such an isolating experience to give birth to a child, and it's such a like overwhelming experience to you're basically giving birth to a life that is so fragile that if you weren't around, they would die, and you are
Yeah.
acting as a shield for them for like years upon years. And imagine if that doesn't have a toll on you. That wouldn't make any sense if you just break
Yeah.
it down to what this experience is. So
Yeah.
it's good that there is a documentary like Witches that is like, hey, you know what, let's actually analyze a specific experience that this woman had and then kind of branch out. So I actually really actually enjoyed even the video essay element of it, like where it felt like clips of media and like
Yeah.
drawing stuff, because it felt very, in some ways you would think, oh, maybe this feels low production or something, but it
Hmm.
doesn't. It
Yeah.
adds to this woman really wanting to tell her story. It kind of
Yeah.
adds to the struggle. Like you feel like, look at her just putting this all together
Yeah.
and making you understand. So I really liked
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, in the beginning, actually, that happens. So, like, it shows an ad to you of like maybe an ad from the 60s or 70s from popular culture, like, which is about, oh, what does a perfect mother look like? She tends to her kids, she looks
Mm,
beautiful, she performs all the tasks, she almost has a virginal beauty about herself. Like, so they build up this, sort of phantom
yeah,
sort of image of, oh, this is what a perfect mother should be. And I think what this movie and the like Salve Marie also talks about is like the generations and generations of women just being told this, like, this is what you are supposed to be as a good mother. And suddenly, when after childbirth you have those thoughts, and then you are thinking, oh, am I not a good mother, am I not a good person then inherently if I am
mm,
having these thoughts, right? uh, so that, I think, is beautifully captured in the pieces of this film, like, as she talks about. But one of the things which I wanted to ask you was, when was the first time you learned about postpartum, like something like postpartum depression exists?
I'm trying to think about this because I
Yeah.
don't know how I came across it. If it was like a piece of film, was it like
Yeah.
just something I learned from media? I do remember visuals of from somewhere. I can't remember where now, but
Yeah.
a mother grappling with the fact that she feels nothing towards her child, like just being like very anxious that she may not love as much. And I'm trying to think of if it was like a TV show like Friends or something.
Hmm.
I'm trying to think if it was something like that, where like someone gave birth and the mother was like, "Why don't I love this child
Yeah.
yet?" Like
Yeah.
coming to terms with that. But it was more a term that I heard, and for a while I used
Yeah.
to confuse PTSD and this, because I
Postpartum
wasn't
dep-
sure
Yeah.
which acronym was what.
Yeah.
But yeah, I actually don't know. Do you know
Yeah.
when you
No,
used it?
no, that's what. Like I think the first time I learned about it, or actually got a hint also about it, was I think when I was 32, which is like just 2 3 years ago. And when we
Hmm.
saw that series Fleischman is in Trouble, right? I was just looking up the name of that
Right.
series, because in
Yeah.
that, the mother, the primary plot point is that she is going through like severe postpartum depression, and that is
Yeah.
creating a lot of rift in their marriage. And like, and not just like immediately after the pregnancy, but years and years later after the pregnancy
Hmm.
also. And that is when, like, kind of, I sort of got introduced to it. And then, as you, like, in our age also, you have friends who have given child, who have birthed a child and all that, and you see the exhaustion that they are
Yeah.
dealing with, like, while they have to also perform all the other tasks of doing. Like, imagine between us, sometimes we talk about how exhausting life is, like, despite of how privileged we are, and like
Yeah.
all the tasks for us get done in the background, and we kind of just have to do our thing. And still then we talk about, like, hey man, this is too exhausting, and like, I need a moment and all that. And in that context, then I think of a new, like, a young mother, right? And what these films talk about, like, they have to do all their tasks, you know
Hmm.
while also, like, of taking care of a child, of an infant, like, as you, like, sometimes when I was young, or like, this, my intrusive thought, or like my fear of being around a baby whenever I used to be handed over a baby, is that I would just drop the baby. Like,
Same.
I've thought this so many number of times. I was like, what if, why are you giving me this responsibility? What if, like,
Yeah.
I just dropped this baby and I hurt it and all that? So imagine, like this was like, for me, like 1%, 2% of my fear and all that. But what, like, Witches kind of shows you is like, the mothers practically live with this fear 24/7.
Yeah.
Like, they get up to check whether the child is breathing or not. like can he hear or not, can he see or not, why is the child not crying, and all, like, I'm also presuming the gender of the child, but like, uh, like all these intrusive thoughts which come to like young mothers, and 24/7, like, and what it must be like, and in Witches she also talks about when she went to the, when she went to seek help to the hospital, essentially, what they offered her is like, support, like, hey, you are a good mother, like you can take care of your child, and all that, like
Yeah.
like there was no no, why am I being presumptuous, like there was no, I was like, what I was coming down to was like there was no exceptional insight that was offered to her, but more like primitive care and like,
Yeah.
support from all the other women, and like stories and all that, just like how when you are going through any sort of difficult time, like I think like if you look at the Wikipedia page, there are various theories which are mentioned for postpartum depression, what like women go through and all that. But yeah, I was just thinking of in the context of this movie, like how it was portrayed and showcased, and the friends she made during that period, and she later ends up interviewing all those friends also, right? And then we get to see, it's not just about like, so it's so many social factors, like sometimes individual factors, what career you have, what kind of life you may have had before it and all that. So all these factors kind of come in together and create these challenges for the women, so which I feel like this movie did brilliantly. And then it also dives into 2 3 horrific stories from the
Yeah.
United States, from Europe, of like actually mothers acting upon, those intrusive thoughts. And then like
Yeah.
sort of, and then it kind of goes on to say, some of those cases are also like one of the cases of a mother who was a very good doctor, who practically herself talked about all these issues, and still, when she struggled with it, she committed the horrific act that she committed.
Yeah.
So then imagine how challenging this must be, and how equipped or less equipped are we to like kind of navigate through all of this.
And this kind of makes me wonder, even your question about, how I learned about postpartum depression, and
Yeah.
like how these conversations were not happening, and how going to that ward was just like other people saying, hey, we feel this too, by the way.
Yeah.
It made me kind of think about, like, in media in general, like the portrayal of like not women's issues, but like specific experiences that women have is so less, like, and a lot of that comes from, like, if you think about I'm about to go off on a if you think about like Saas Bahu shows, right?
Yeah.
uh and if you think about like how there was like archetypes, so there was
Yeah.
Tulsi, right? Kyunki Saas bhi kabhi bahu thi. So there was Tulsi, and then there was like, was it Kamalika was not in that, right? But whatever, the vamp
Why
character.
do I know this? Kamolika was in Kasoti Zindagi Ki. Why do I know
Correct,
this?
correct. So Prerna and Kamalika, correct. So
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
either the perfect ideal woman, or there's the
Yeah.
woman who goes against all those enforced rules, and
Yeah.
she doesn't uphold the image of a woman that a man wants in service, right? So
Yeah.
that was like mainstream media in India for a
Yeah.
large portion of the audience, was like just these two
Yeah.
experiences. Now you're telling me that there's nothing in the middle, and you're telling me that
Yeah.
there are only this, and that's why there has been such negative reception to women characters in media that show some sort of agency. So, for
Yeah.
example, like Summer in 500 Days of Summer, right?
Hmm.
Her character tells Tom that she just doesn't feel love for him. And there is so much anger towards her because she just expresses that this is
Yeah.
just not working for her. And when she finds it somewhere else, they're like, how dare she? As if she is
Yeah.
not allowed to experience that, as if
Yeah.
she's not allowed to make a choice. Then, like Skylar in Breaking Bad, a
Hmm.
woman whose husband disappears for
Yeah.
days on end making meth, and she has a negative response to it, lashes out, has an
Yeah.
affair, all of these things, right? And that trickles down into the real life. I mean, media is
Yeah.
also a reflection of what's going on.
Yeah.
So, if you look at the most hated characters, if you ever look up these lists of like who are the most hated characters in TV shows or films, a majority of them, if they're not like heinous villains, are women.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it's a fact. And it's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's because there's, for the first time, women are like, let's make space for our nuances, and
Yeah.
we're not comfortable with it. We don't like it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
how can you have nuance? Only I can have my complex hero journey.
Yeah.
You have to be perfect. You have to be manic pixie
Yeah.
girl. I have to go through my complications and I'm the hero and I get rewarded at the end because I learned something very basic that I should have known in the first place.
Yeah.
So I
which
don't know
is
why I
which is
got so
very
worked up
interesting.
over that.
This
Yeah.
kind of trickles down into our real lives also. Like as you grow up, you realize ki when you were a kid, all some of your aunts or the people in your vicinity, in your society, or around in your city and all that, the women who were talked negatively about or were talked in like poor light. As you grow up, you realize, oh, these were the women which actually exercised their agency,
Yeah,
which
correct.
kind of
Yeah.
rebelled against the system, and you realize all your childhood you were told negative stories about them, or like they were shown in negative light to like in general discussion that you overheard and all that. So
Yeah.
that
And
I
turns
was
out
just
they were just not married. Like it would just be like, oh, they didn't marry.
they didn't marry, or like
Okay.
this is
Yeah.
they just choose to exercise their agency in some form or the other.
Yeah.
Like they choose a different path and all that, like which is very like interesting, like how it kind of comes down from our mainstream like TV shows and whatever we are making into our everyday lives as well. And which now is an interesting segue to why this movie is called Witches. Because
Mm.
as the director and the filmmaker is narrating her story about sort of her postpartum depression and all that, she's also talking about how it like she's kind of going back into history and thinking about the various points of time when still at least today we have some sort of conversation going out around it, right? Imagine a point of time in history where there was no knowledge about this, and when women kind of admitted these thoughts or spoke about these thoughts, like they were kind of tarnished even more, like they were kind of almost like so. In this, like when they talk about the idea of witches, there's a first the question thrown about is, when you hear the word witches, what is that you think about? What is the image that comes to your mind, you know
Mm.
so and then she talks about the idea of the fact that the witches who were there at that point of time were actually women who were like sort of consulting healers, like kind of between them they were practicing experimenting on medicines, on what is they are also care providers. So there is a
Mm.
point in the film where the medical establishment, maybe like this is like this may not be studied fact, but the film talks about this, that the medical establishment of historic times actually sought out these midwives, the women who kind of offered any kind of medical help, because it came in the way of their profits and sort of
Yeah.
markets and all that. So they sought out these women and then sort of exorcise them, or kind of punish them for sort of offering the healing experience, or healing knowledge and all that. So then she talks
Yeah.
about all these women who admitted to oh, I'm actually having negative thoughts at that point of time, were told that, oh no, you are a witch, that is why you are
Mm.
having all these intrusive thoughts right now, you are not a good mother, you have the spirit of the witch. And then in the movie we learn that these women who were then called witches, they admitted to those thoughts and they chose death, practically death,
Yeah.
by the society, versus actually saying, no, no, this is just the thoughts which I'm having, this is not me. you know
Yeah.
that
And
is why
imagine how bad it must be in that time for them to
yeah,
just go like, you know what, it's better if I die. This is very
yeah,
like tumhara mental illness, hamara mental illness
yeah,
with sorcery. It becomes like
yeah,
that. So there's
yeah,
which is weird. Like any they talk about like when okay, I don't know if I should get into like the vaccine and all of that because that's intense. But
mm,
when there was research done about the medical
mm,
any kind of illness that happens, and if there's a
yeah,
cure for it, when there's an antidote, women's like systems or women's bodies are not taken into a
yeah,
factor for these solutions, right?
yeah, yeah,
And it's not that the solutions are not good, they are, but they never take the side effects that will happen to a woman's body are
yeah,
never taken into factor, right?
yeah,
They're left out of all of these conversations because you
yeah,
know like god forbid, and that applies to mental health, like mental
yeah,
illness. A lot of the research will be like, oh, how does it affect men, and how do they deal with it?
yeah,
But it's like, oh, if a woman's saying that I'm experiencing intrusive thoughts, which is like part of mental illness, which comes as a side
yeah,
effect of like giving birth and going through this like very intense experience, very
yeah,
singular intense experience. A body is leaving your body, a body is coming out of it,
yeah,
you know that cannot be a chill thing. That cannot be
yeah,
like, yeah, tomorrow I'll be fine. There has to be And the fact that there's not enough study on it is crazy, because it's the most common
Yeah.
thing that we as
Yeah.
humans do. We reproduce. Like, this is what we do a lot, all
Yeah.
of the time. And it has the least research around the effects of it after,
Yeah.
because they actually don't want to deter women from doing it. They actually
Hmm.
don't want women to stop. It's
Yeah.
again like the same medical, it's like a factory. You need to
Yeah.
churn it out. This is making me really, just talking about it is making me very upset now in retrospect.
Yeah, like for a long time, like especially when you see your close friends and like go through motherhood and all that, I feel it's such a, like, this is again a like extreme statement that I'm throwing out, but it's such a ask that you put out through a woman that, oh, like it's presumed only that if you are getting married, then you are going to want to have kids, and that's seen as a
Yeah.
natural progression. And it's just that it's, I don't know, like, a good disclaimer at this point of time would be that, hey, who are we to talk about these things, right? We are no experts and all
Yeah,
that.
true.
But
True, true.
like, this is what we do with this project. We talk about the movies and the characters in whose
Yeah.
shoes we dive into, and through that experience we try to find out this, the interconnectedness that we have, or like what might be that human experiencing and all that. So we still don't know, we are no perfect, and we have no clue of how this functions. But like, as you go through this film and the point that it talks about, you kind of wonder about these things, right? And
Yeah.
so, like, again, diving into one of the questions which the director, like, so as she talks about, like, there is an interview of the director online which I saw, and she says, like, her son is 4 years old now. Like, she says at some point of time she will be like, he will be, old enough to be able to watch this film. And she says, I am just like worried that he will be super embarrassed of me,
Hmm.
that, like, these are the thoughts which I was having and all that. But she says what she hopes is that, after watching this, the son will also feel that there is nothing in the world that he can hide from me, that he can also share all of his intrusive
Yeah.
thoughts with me.
Yeah.
So, as I like, what I was thinking was, in our context, like, if in the context of especially our mothers, like, now we know that, okay, they, when they must have given us birth, they might have also gone through these feelings
Hmm.
and all that. Like, I'm just thinking, like, we might talk about this in detail when we talk about Salve Maria also. But like,
Yeah.
what are the experiences our mothers must have gone through, as
Oh,
they
yeah.
brought us into the life, and then do they associate that with, our being also? Like, does, like, the recurring date of our birthday, or like, like, whenever think about childbirth or our younger days and all that, like, does that association happen at some point of time? And like, then the lack of
Wow.
conversation around it is, such a missing point of our connection, you know
Yeah.
that there's such so much a fundamental thing over there, and like, we are not connecting because of it and all that. And that also leads down to, like, we are not sharing our intrusive, obviously, like, why would we? But
Yeah.
we are also not sharing our dark thoughts, intrusive thoughts with our mothers and all that. Like, there's like so much repression around that fact.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
the Suraj Barjatification of family life, right? Where everyone
Yeah.
has to like hold hands and sing Kumbaya, but not say, hey, there was a point where I kind of wanted to push you down a flight of stairs, and it entered my brain. And I'm telling you now so that I don't say it. I don't do it
Yeah.
because I want to talk about it, like what's going on, and then we talk about it. So
Yeah.
yeah, which actually leads quite well, if I may do a segue myself,
Yes, into Salve
into
Maria.
Salve
But
Maria.
before, like, one question only, like, because while you're talking about it, which I had was,
Damn it, Aniket, my segue
do
failed.
you remember one Hindi film or one film from our culture which
Hmm.
talked about postpartum depression or the challenges of motherhood? Is there any character that comes to mind? Like, because
Okay,
nothing is coming to
so
my mind right now.
immediately, obviously, we have to visit the Preeti Zinta like universe of like where she
But
gets
that's not
pregnant
so.
and
That's
ostracized.
about pregnancy,
But
right?
yeah, it's about pregnancy, and the only thing I could think of is that she didn't want in Chori Chori Chupke Chupke, directed
Huh.
by feminist kings Abbas Mastan. They 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 had her reluctant to give up her child because she was being a surrogate for Rani and Salman's characters.
Yeah.
So, and she's giving birth, but then she doesn't want to leave her child because she's like, feels
Yeah.
very us against her against the world at that point.
Yeah.
So that was one where I remember there being that sentiment. Other than
Yeah.
that, not one, dude. I can't think of
Yeah.
a single one. Like,
That's it.
it's usually the dad. See, the thing is, usually what happens is these films are about like the dad left, you know, and then like even in ZNMD, for example, it's the dad who decided that he wanted to
Yeah,
go off and
yeah,
do his own thing. Like, a lot of the
yeah,
stories are like dads leaving, and a
yeah,
lot of times those dads get pretty easy redemption. Like, to be honest, like,
yeah,
they're fine. ZNMD is
yeah,
actually a good example of not letting you off the hook, right? Like,
yeah,
it doesn't end on like a hey, everything was fine. But yeah, women don't get to do that, because then they would be like, actually, the examples I'm thinking of are pre-pregnancy, or of
yeah,
women turning down wanting to be pregnant, and they're the villains of
yeah,
that movie, like Aitraz with Priyanka
yeah.
Chopra, where her villainy is literally that she doesn't want to have a kid because she wants to
Oh
focus on
fuck
her career.
yeah! Oh shit! I forgot.
Yeah,
Yeah, this. Yeah. Oh
yeah.
shit. Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
damn.
So I can't think of. Can you think of a single one? Because I actually
No,
cannot.
that's what like that's incredible that you have been able to pull off this example, because the moment I was thinking about it, I was thinking one of the most iconic films in Bollywood's history is Mother India, right? And
Yeah,
the whole point, like the whole like a catharsis of Mother India is the point where she has to kill her son, you know,
yeah.
sort of make the point of doing that. And then similarly in like I don't know, like, but is Vastav covering that? But in Vastav also the mother kills
Vastav,
the
she's like the
yeah.
ultimate mom, dude. She's only doing it
uh,
because he's become a gangster now.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
So, but the thing is, like, they portray that, oh, the final act, like, it's almost Shakespearean, like, oh, the mother has
Yeah.
to kill the kid
What
and
she
all that. Like,
birthed.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there's no, like, I am still again struggling with, there's no film, I think, which is struggling with like postpartum depression. In fact, even I would be like saying that Chori Chori Chupke Chupke, what you're talking about, is not about postpartum depression, the
It's not.
example which you mentioned,
It's not.
but it is mostly about, oh, the cultural significance of how the writers saw mothers, and the relation between mothers and sons and
It
whatever.
was to protect the integrity of Preeti Zinta also as a character, because
Um,
imagine if
yeah,
she was just like, fuck it, I don't give a shit about my kid, you can have
yeah,
him. That would
yeah,
be like wrong in
yeah,
Bollywood, that kind of, for that kind of audience. So they
yeah,
almost were like, no, no, but she resisted, but eventually, she made the ultimate sacrifice for another mom. So it wasn't portrayed like,
yeah,
oh, I'm going through something. It was more like, how can a mother
yeah,
not care about her son? She has to, right? At least a little.
yeah,
So it
yeah.
was more like that.
I think our cinema focuses a lot on integrity of characters, man. Like it's a lot about integrity of characters. I think we need to do away with some loss of integrity. But anyway, now moving on to your
No
segue.
sanskar, only samskar. Um. Anyway.
Okay. Segueing into Salve Maria. Go for it.
Hmm. Salve Maria. I think basically how we watched it was we watched Salve Maria first and then we saw Witches. So it
Yeah.
felt really cool because it felt like we watched a film which was based on a book that was about this phenomenon of like
Yeah.
women going through postpartum depression. So
Yeah.
Salve Maria is a very specific individual story of a mother
Yeah.
who is just given birth and she's raising her child. While this is happening, she is hearing a new story of how this other woman drowned her children in the bathtub, right?
Yeah.
And she is navigating that. Why? And it is not clear right away, but it does seem like she is unable to connect with her child, um,
Yeah.
and is slowly getting sick of being a mom, or is
Yeah.
feeling very disconnected and detached from it all.
Yeah.
And those thoughts start coming in. So the
Yeah.
film is kind of capturing that time in her life. And one of the not cool, that would feel wrong to say cool, but one of the, I would say, interesting approaches that the film takes is, at least I felt, it kind
Yeah.
of has like a slight horror vibe to it.
Yeah.
Like there's a weird like Black Swan, like, yeah, psychological horror where the world around us starts to just get like all the light seems to be sucked out of it. And you feel
Yeah.
like, we're just walking towards, like, retroactively, I realized we felt like just someone walking into the darkness,
Yeah.
like they capture it really well. That way.
Yeah. Yeah, that is true. Like that is one of the beautiful things about the filmmaking of Salve Maria, because it
Hmm.
almost has this horror thriller treatment to it. Like
Yeah.
so like again, I think you have laid down the plot of the movie beautifully. But what happens in the film is like after she has given birth, we see that already she is struggling with young motherhood, because she's struggling with, okay, she's never smiling at her child. She's never, like, she's struggling with the
She
same fear.
doesn't talk to her child. She doesn't
She
talk to
doesn't
her
talk to her
child.
child. Like that's one of the things which the husband mentions, right? Like he says,
He keeps
hey,
bringing
I
up,
have read in a book, that if young mothers talk to their kids, it helps in something, and helps in the kid learning to talk faster and all that.
Yeah.
So she doesn't talk to her child. She's getting up at like odd hours in the night to just check if he's breathing. So she's
Mm.
already struggling to a point of time. And you can see, like, again, while she's going through motherhood, there's also tasks around the house which she has to do, right? Which like the window is not repaired, and like it is open, and it keeps
Mm.
on, like, the cold air keeps coming in, and like she has to fix that. She's
A
telling her
bird comes
husband,
in.
a bird comes in. So like, again, like these things she's going through, and as she's going through, she learns about this case of a woman who's drowned her 10-month-old twins. And now this is what I kind of like like sort of could understand in the film quite a bit, is that when you're going through some dark thoughts yourself, right, and when you are kind of experiencing some like negative emotions and intrusive thoughts yourself, then
Mm.
you're like, this is where our interconnectedness as species like really comes through, I think. Then you are looking at other examples out there who might have had, which even the mother in, like, sort of witches does the same, right? She tries to find people. But in this case, in Salve Maria's case, it just happens to be that there's this extreme worst case of like a woman in the vicinity which drowned her kids. And then she
Yeah.
feels, then it's almost like, she's fascinated and obsessed with this mother who has killed her kids. And like
Yeah.
the trope which you're talking about, like the horror thriller trope, is that, how you would show a stalker boyfriend, like, or stalker man, like following, like, cutting the
Mm.
newspaper articles, posting everything in one place. That is what she's doing with this mother. She's trying to gather as much information about her, because again, yes, she's a mother also, but she's a writer as well, right? In the
Mm.
movie, like, you learn that there's one point of time in the film when she wins an award. Like, she gets a call that she has won an award for some of her work, right? And she
Yeah.
immediately goes to talk to the on the phone about it. And what she forgets in that journey is that she has left her child behind, and she completely, for those few moments, forgets her child. And when she,
Yeah.
like, reality comes back to her, that she realizes, oh shit, where did I leave my child? Who did I live with? Then she realizes, and she comes back to the thought of, am I such a careless mother that I can, like,
Mm.
just for a few moments not think about my child at all? But yeah, but then she's a writer, and she's also trying to articulate these thoughts. Like, again,
Mm.
there's such a similarity in which is the mother is a filmmaker. She makes the film to process these thoughts itself. And I feel, as writers, as creative people and all that, like, this becomes such an existential thing. Like, when you're going through a dark, like the dark thoughts and, like, negative emotions, depressive episodes, or whatever you talk about, if you are not able to articulate it, if you're not able to process it, in the medium that you are comfortable expressing in,
Mm.
that becomes immense, insurmountable pain to you. Because then it becomes, so why am I not able to understand it? This is what I'm like. If I'm not able to write about this or share with the world, then
Mm.
what am I like? Then I'm not being honest at all. So that is why she's kind of like, I can totally relate to her wanting to follow and understand everything about the criminal mother, right? And that is how the story also moves forward. She's trying to chase and find the mother all the time, while at the also in the meantime, she kind of also encounters another perfect mother character, Anna,
Mm.
which is again beautifully played, that character, I feel, who has like
Yeah.
two or
Oh my God.
three kids. And Anna, in her very, like, in the most simplest of ways, she shares the intrusive thoughts, like, hey, sometimes I feel like, doing things to my kids, and like, don't you feel dumpsters would be full of kids if you were allowed and all that?
Which is
But she does it.
so big, man. Like she takes the weight out of it immediately
Yeah,
just by making it like a joke. And so people
yeah,
feel, oh yeah, I felt this too. That's what she was trying
yeah,
to do. She's trying to form that community with Maria, but obviously Maria is like very
yeah.
in here, at this point.
Yeah, so but that's the thing, like, I feel like we exist so much in the spaces between each other, but Maria exists so much in
Hmm.
her head. Like, she's living in
Yeah.
her head, she's trying to deal with this, like, alone, which I think towards the end of the, we will also talk about the individualism in this film, and why, like, it takes a village to raise a kid versus all of that. But
Hmm.
so in Anna's case, you see that though she's having these thoughts which she's sharing very casually, hey, sometimes I also feel like doing things to my kids and all that, but she's a perfect mother in, like, in the ways,
Hmm.
like, what is expected out of a mother and all that. So that, like, sort of contradiction Maria is going through, and then she goes after, like, this criminal mother to find out what she keeps talking about, and which is a phrase with which I've bored all of my friends with. You know, she keeps on talking about what is the difference between lucidity and darkness, like, clarity. Like, she is kind of standing at the edge of it, is what I feel.
Hmm.
And there's this that she really wants to understand, if she's having these dark thoughts, does that mean she is a bad person? And this was my major takeaway from both of these films. Like, sometimes I think all of us, I think intrusive thoughts has become a very integral part of my vocabulary now post both of these films, that I think all of us have intrusive thoughts. Before,
Yeah.
I also believe that, if you want to correct an action, you have to prevent first the thought from coming in, right? Like, it's almost like, how our galis are. Our galis are mother chod, bhan chod, like all the galis are directed towards women. If you
Hmm.
want to stop the violence towards women and all that, like, maybe somewhere we need to trickle back and address the language also, the curse words also, right?
Hmm.
Which very naturally sometimes come to us because of being in this culture and society and all those kinds of things, right? So I've always felt like maybe we have to prevent the thought, but now I'm realizing the thought is almost an essential part of the human experience. The mind
Hmm.
will go there, mind will go to its dark corners and all that, to have
Yeah.
that intrusive thoughts, and then to have spaces to share intrusive thoughts is, I think, the
Yeah.
thing. Because, and that is what cinema becomes for us, no? Like, we immediately, like, oh, thank God there's someone like Maria existing out there. Like, I'm just feeling the relief if so many women watch Witches or Salve Maria, the relief that they will feel.
Yeah.
Thank God that there's someone out there who's experiencing the same thing that I myself experienced. But yeah,
Yeah. Intrusive thoughts, I feel like, are just this like this this huge bubble that keeps like filling up your brain. And if you
yeah,
leave it in there, it'll like make your brain explode. But if you let it out, it won't. So
yeah,
it'll just lose its weight. It'll kind of lose. It'll disintegrate. It'll like whatever. It'll
yeah,
dissolve. If you just say
yeah,
it, if you just talk to someone, if you just share it, they'll be like, yeah, oh, I experience this also. So you don't feel like a bad person,
yeah,
but also the problem comes from us trying to fit into like a type of person. We've created archetypes
yeah,
so much, right? It just in our lives, like we've all done it. So
yeah,
that is definitely something we can connect to. We can't connect to the experience of giving birth to someone and then experiencing that, but we can
yeah,
connect to like wanting to be seen a certain way, and then when you're
yeah,
not that, being disappointed with yourself so much that it might
yeah,
drive you to something like her. I was just thinking about like that scene about her leaving her child behind when she heard about the award, and the way
yeah,
that the film almost like you feel this panic because immediately that she's run out. Like the film doesn't fill in the gaps for you. You're like, I'm there.
yeah,
But I was thinking like, yeah, but it's okay. Like the idea that the husband is able to give her all this advice while he's not quitting his job. So
yeah,
he's this whole time working, right? She's at home,
yeah,
right? The decision's been made that she needs to be with the kid. The
yeah,
husband also points out that at one point when she's like, hey, what if I went alone? He's like, you can't leave the kid alone. So I was like,
yeah,
you can leave the kid alone. And I'm not saying
yeah,
the husband's wrong that, obviously the kid needs to be around the mom. I understand that there's all these things. But the
yeah,
fact that he's unable to understand how much of a anchor, a burden that can be like for someone that is literally attached to another human in a way that you will never have to be, right? You
yeah,
will never have to experience that. And even if you can't stop that, the fact
yeah,
that you can't empathize with the weight of that is
yeah,
not okay, actually. Because
yeah,
the husband's not really like it portrayed like he's the good husband. And I'm not
yeah,
saying he's like a bad person, right? And that's
yeah,
again, I don't want to club him into anything. He's just making
yeah,
mistakes.
yeah,
But he doesn't see it. Like he's unable to
yeah,
see this part. Like something's going on with my
yeah.
wife.
Yeah. So the husband's character is beautiful in terms of it showcases us the limitations of men in their thought
Hmm.
process, because of, again, the culture and the system that we are a part of. Because you can see that the husband is sort of in ways a caring husband. The reason why he's also trying to say, he's like, there is constant thing of he's trying to avoid paternity leave, which he's supposed to take, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
He's avoiding it because he feels he has to work right now because the family needs to be financially supported. And
Hmm.
then they are fighting into the roles of, oh, like, now she has to take care of the kid, I have to do the work, and then we will find our time. So, like, there's a lot of things in the, like, you think that the intentions of the husband are all good, but there is also
Hmm.
very casual sexism, casual chauvinism over there, where, it's
Yeah.
certainly like all the points which you're talking about, which just come because of, like, by default, till the point we really are confronted with this, or like someone like calls us out on it. I don't think so. Like either like you educate yourself or like like, but then that education also I think falls short to the like limitation of a lived experience. I think once you
Mm.
make a mistake, your ability as a human being to accept that mistake and then change and move on from that should count more than the fact that okay, hey, you like this is who you are,
Yeah.
this is what it is and
Again,
all that.
there's a
So
perception thing. Like right now, we're talking about this and we're being like very empathetic, and we're,
yeah,
the archetype of like a woke person or like a
yeah,
feminist man, right?
yeah,
But
yeah,
that's not to say that we've not messed up massively. Like that's not to say
yeah,
that we've not had blind spots all the time
yeah,
where we just don't see it that way. So with
yeah,
it's like it's just that there's a, and again it comes into from our perspective to not put ourselves in the box of like, oh, I am a feminist man, so obviously like
yeah,
I kind of messed up, right?
yeah,
And then putting that pressure instead of just being like, if someone confronts you with something you did wrong, or it
yeah,
says, hey, you did this wrong, just being like, okay, I'm sorry, I need to work on it. It's very
yeah,
simple, right? It's not like
yeah,
no one's saying there's a perfect person. Again, the idea
yeah,
of being perfect is what is at its core
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
issue. So
Yeah, absolutely. Like one of the like everyday experiences which I remember of myself only, like when I was a kid and growing up through my maybe teenage years and all that also, I used to feel that I have this intuitive sense of things. And then when my mom used to cook food, some days maybe her heart was not in it, or like whatever. Like she was not like I had
mm,
no clue what she was going through, right? But then I used to tell her just ki, mummy aaj khana man laga ke nahi banaya, like today you have not put your heart
mm,
into the food that you have cooked. And I used to feel, oh, I am so intuitive that I can just tell from the food which is
mm,
cooked, like aaj mani laga. But then that she is doing that every day of her life, and like
yeah,
what we are also doing every day of our life, there are like we fail more times at it than we actually succeed. But
yeah,
of mothers it is just accepted that every day the food will be delicious and awesome and all that. And I used to just be super irritated at that कि आज तो खाना मन
yeah,
लगा के नहीं बनाया, like like, and that is I
yeah,
think like, and that kind of trickles down. And like this is a very small minor example, but then I think
yeah,
the larger serials also you're talking about as us as men, like the whole point of like feminist men and all that, like yes, feminist men also fuck up big time at like a lot of
yeah,
places and all that. But how do we like kind of address that, learn from that, and like kind of really integrate that into our life and have a conversation about it, so that like okay, yes, there is an individual aspect to it, like okay, this is the person, but there is also a collective aspect of being a part of the larger society that we inhabit in. And then when confronted with these issues, when confronted with these problems, how are we going to address these problems moving forward? I think that becomes
yeah,
a like a integrating, like in the context of the husband which we are talking about. But then yeah,
yeah.
is there anything that you would like to talk about Salve Maria,
And
like
then it
Maria,
also
sorry?
kind of, yeah, it sort of ties into this, right? Where these two people are not, they're kind of in a bubble having this conversation with each other, trying to navigate being parents,
Yeah,
especially Maria trying to be a mother.
yeah,
And the idea that like it shouldn't be just the two of them. And
yeah,
at the risk of sounding like a joint family advertising message, which I'm not being, I'm
yeah,
just saying that the concept of community, it's not just, I'm not talking about family members, like you need to be
yeah,
around your grandparents or whatever. I'm saying that
yeah,
we were raised in groups of people.
yeah,
That's just how it worked. And we kind of, there were multiple uh, father, mother figures around a child who would help in the process of raising the kid, because it does take a village, like you said. It
yeah,
does. It takes a lot of empathy, and it's scary, and like no, like no person can be on guard 9 to just like 24 hours a day,
yeah,
as they have to shield this child who is so fragile. Like it is terrifying. When I thought about it, dude, we were watching the films, I was like, man, can
yeah,
you imagine like the fact that a child can just get hurt and that could be life altering? Like
yeah,
a child just drowning in the bathtub, a child hitting their head against something, a child falling. Like it's like so scary. And the fact that it's like on two people, one of them has to go to
yeah,
work and it's just on one person. That's
yeah,
insane. I don't think it was ever supposed to be like that.
yeah. That is the sort of thing about Salve Maria also as it closes, right? Like it talks about the aspect of like it's made to be as an individual problem, like the whole point of, oh,
Yeah.
because it is all on you, oh, you are supposed to be a good mother and you are not supposed to have
Mm.
the intrusive thoughts and all that. So it's specifically a you problem, you know whereas we realize, like, sort of, and what you're also talking about is right, like the community aspect of it maybe could come into, like, that is how we could confront the problem. Like how like one of the, I think, which I was talking to you earlier about, right, this on Cine Europa, reviewer called as Mariana Hristova. She talks that it seems to be easier to question motherhood instead of the consumerist logic of modern life, because
Yeah.
these two are urban couples living by themselves, and they're kind of left to tackle this issue on their own. That is why you see Maria also seeking communities, right? Like in her, like in which is also like she seeks the coven of like the mothers who have gone through similar experiences and all that. In Maria also
Mm.
she is doing that, but then that is really not helping her, because Maria as a character is someone who's very individualistic. Like she's someone
Yeah.
who's living in her head, and that is the beautiful thing in this film is how that ties into the filmmaking language of the film. Like you're talking about how it is almost like constructed like a horror thriller movie.
Yeah.
You see that when she's in the supermarket, she's looking at all the objects in the supermarket,
Yeah.
and you are visualizing, oh, what is she thinking about doing with those objects? Like,
Yeah.
what are the thoughts which are coming to her mind? And then, like, as it moves into the movie, it goes abstract, and it ties a little bit into like, the name of the movie, Salve Maria, like, the image of Christianity, of motherhood and all that, like of that religious aspect also it dives into a little bit. And as she comes closer and closer to reaching out to the criminal mother, right?
Mm.
That is where the trope of the film is like really dives into one of the, like, I think you brought out this reference, is closer reference is Lost Daughter. uh
Yeah. It's a
yeah,
lot like Lost Daughter. Like
yeah,
Olivia Colman's character who didn't feel like she was a perfect mom and she left, you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
And the guilt of that haunts her, but because she wasn't just born to be a mother, like she didn't know how to like
yeah,
navigate that. And that's probably the first
yeah,
film I saw that in, you know?
yeah,
Probably the first film where that went down. And
yeah,
another film I was thinking of, not
yeah,
immediately skimp over Lost Daughter to mention this, but I was thinking about Jab We Met, dude, when we were talking about this, and how Shahid Kapoor's mother
yeah,
leaves and runs away and
yeah.
isn't really the parental figure in Shahid Kapoor's life anymore, in a
Hmm.
way. And like Shahid Kapoor understanding his mom and being
Yeah,
like, oh, I get it, you know.
yeah,
But I don't know if that means that she abandoned her role of being a mom. But it did have
yeah,
that implication of like, why are you putting that on her? You
yeah,
know, like, isn't she allowed to have her life as well?
yeah. To accept
And
her humanity as a, like, as a human being also, like not just see her in the role of a mother. But incredible, man, like, only your vocabulary of cinema can find out this immediate example of Jab We Met. Like you went to Jab We Met's mother, imagine, like, the mother in
Jovi
Jab We
Med
Met. I was
was,
like, where in Jab We Met is pregnancy like mentioned? But
yeah,
yeah,
not pregnancy, but
fascinating.
just the role of women. Like, very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, fascinating. And like again, like both these movies are brilliant on that aspect. And I think the trope of intrusive thoughts, which like the whole thing Salve Maria is kind of coming towards, is Maria's inability to kind of share the intrusive thoughts that she's having with
Mm.
anyone. She's hearing it from everywhere. She's following this case of, which is an extreme case in that manner and all that. So she's really invested into the shoes, and she's, as a like a novelist also, she's trying to write and document it all. But then
Yeah.
more and more she's asking, the what is the difference between lucidity and darkness? Please tell me, like, okay, clarity and like darkness, what is the fine line? And she's almost
Yeah.
obsessed with that. And I also caught like myself being obsessed with that understanding of, hey, as
Great line.
every human being, like as a human being in this, like you will have extreme dark thoughts at some point of time. Like, I think the lot of problems in our society is also because people run away from, try to suppress the dark thoughts and all that,
Mm.
or the inability to share it. I think healthy circles, healthy spaces, or even toxic spaces for that matter, arise from the need of people wanting to share, these unhealthy thoughts. It's just that maybe in toxic places they're not addressed in the right manner. Ki, hey, this is
Yeah.
like this is okay or whatever, but more like kind of championed and cherished and all those kinds of things. But like having intrusive thoughts is a necessary part of, not necessary, but integral part of a human experience. And
Yeah.
this film does
It's
it.
not who you are. It is just a thought.
Yeah,
And I think that's the thing, right? Lucidity or darkness is like, you're not
yeah.
defined by that thought. This is just a
You're not
dark
defined
thought.
by thought, and especially when you're going through such a transformational phase in your life, like you have just given birth to a kid
Mm.
and like your body is changing. You're like, look at, so again, the trope of a thriller horror movie. Your protagonist is constantly tired, it's bloodied, like it's the
Yeah.
exhaustion is kind of weighing down upon, like sometimes when you are hungry you're not making right choices, man. Like imagine being
Yeah.
a
Just
mother,
being
like
weighed down.
that might do to your mind state and all that. So that
Some
like
dark images, dude. Some really dark moments, like things she imagines happening to her child. And it
yeah,
does that really great job of making it really like you as an audience are aware that the walls are closing in, and that
yeah,
the only path is to what cannot be a good end. There can only be tragedy at the end of this. Like you keep feeling like,
yeah,
even though, like, if you actually think about it, she's not done anything yet, like, but
yeah,
they have this great way of getting inside her head. And
yeah,
yeah, I thought, like, look, this film festival, there have been some great films that we watched, and maybe there are films that I prefer to these two, right?
yeah,
But I don't think any other film encroached upon a subject matter, but that really stayed with me to a way
yeah,
where it's kind of shaped so much of how I think now and how I view a
yeah,
lot of things. Like, it was one of those films where the more I thought about it, the more we talked about it, I was just like, man, like, this is an experience. Like, I didn't know, obviously I know about postpartum depression, but I didn't know the extent of how
yeah,
lonely, of how isolating, of how just really suffocating it can be. And I'm glad
yeah.
we watched these two.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. Like, I think uh, we will like kind of forever be caught up in trying to rank our movies. Every time we discuss a
Yeah.
film, we will feel like, hey, actually, this is my favorite film and all that. But every film festival, I also like kind of align with, oh, this is also my most personal film to me. And in that sense, like Salve Maria's character, not for the postpartum depression, because that is something which I can never experience
Hmm.
and all that, but her idea of her being a writer who lives a lot in her head, and then she's processing a dark time in her life while she's also looking at all the other wrong cases out there which are happening, and then she's kind of aligning with herself and really questioning her place in the
Yeah.
context of it all. Like as we were talking about crossing the other day, crossing, we were talking about the idea of the catharsis comes when you address the issue, you're finally able to live with yourself. So so goes for like Maria in Salve Maria, right? Everything that she's doing, the extreme like things that she's kind of diving into, she's just doing that, one, to find out her answers, but also to be able to live with herself on the opposite side of all of this. And I think somewhere like the movie offers us that, like the somewhere the movie offers us a time where she can live with herself. And I was just thinking, this part of necessary, part of being a human, like as you age, you think, I think you go through more tragedies also, which are life defining tragedies and all that. Like how do
Yeah.
you kind of continue to live with yourself after that is like a very interesting part of being human. And Salve Maria kind of does it beautifully. And thereby I think in the context of everything, like I think Ghostlight will also come close, but Salve Maria would be the most personal film for me. And like there's again major
Absolutely.
takeaways that we talk about. And I think with that we are done, unless is there anything else that you have?
No,
What,
no,
what,
just watch Jab We Met Again is what I would say, and think
yeah,
about
which
it.
reminds me, which is streaming on Mubi. If
It is.
if you want to catch it, it is a beautiful film. And in that, like the mother talks about, right, like that she's like embarrassed about her son learning about it. And so imagine this, like we can cut out this thought later if we are not like diving into it, but like imagine you grow up to a certain age, or like the age which you're in right now,
Hmm.
and then you come across a diary of your mother, or like a art piece of your mother which talks about this aspect of time of her life, when she had
Hmm.
all these dark thoughts of like kind of when she had you. What would your uh, experience or reaction be and all that? And because I'm posing this question to you, I'll just answer it myself so that you have time to think with it. I think
Hmm.
like it's seen as like when we write about our dark thoughts, or like when we share our vulnerable moments and all that, we fear so much that, oh, how am I going to be viewed in the eyes of this person that I'm sharing these things with? But it almost like I have found it 100% of the times, like or like rather most of the time, that becoming a point of connection between you and the other person, like that they know, like they know where your pain comes from, or like where your sufferings come from and all that. So it instantly becomes, so I think the role of art and storytelling, and also like as friends and family members and all that, of us sharing the dark thoughts with each other, comes from the space
Hmm.
of like really trying to establish that connection. as not just that we only keep sharing dark thoughts, we also have lighter moments and all that. But it almost immediately, like, so I'm like, if I'm reading my mom's, I would actually like to, this is a wish which I would have. Like, if I, like, they
Yeah.
ask this question of if you could go back in time, and like with time travel, I think there is almost a movie script there where a boy goes back in time during
Hmm.
the postpartum period of her mother, and then he sees, like, that time travel happens, and what is the, like, the journey that he has around that, as he
Yeah.
befriends her mother or whatnot, like, and all that. So I would almost wish that I would actually want to see that
To know what it
unfold,
was
and like
like.
what is it, yeah, what it was like.
I
But
think
yeah,
so
what about
too.
you,
I
man?
think so too. I feel that way, and I also think one, obviously it would have opened the door. If I read something like that, it would open the door to, like, you would feel like sharing something. Like
Yeah,
it's how we
yeah,
operate. We're like, oh, you shared this. Sometimes I feel this way.
yeah,
And it kind of makes it like you've now created that space where you can have the conversation. But I was also thinking, as you were saying that, like, going back and seeing, let's say if my mother had like intrusive thoughts of like killing me, like in Salve
yeah,
Maria,
yeah,
I think it would almost add so much weight to being alive.
yeah,
Like, wouldn't it
yeah,
add so much weight that she didn't, and how much it took, and how much it is that you're there, and that she loves you and cares about you, is like,
yeah,
it's a lot. And I think that's what would stick with me, I think.
yeah. That's what she fought with, right? Like,
Yeah.
which, funnily, it makes me think of Gone Girl. Like, the two partners almost like start like, the whole thought is like,
Yeah.
caressing the head of the partner, and don't you want to just smash the head of your partner at some point of time?
Yeah. Yeah.
It begins with a
Yeah.
extreme
It is
intrusive
like
thought,
that.
right? Like, but yeah, man, beautiful. Like, I think beautiful how you put it up. Yeah, I think that's about it. Is
Yeah.
there anything else remaining?
Nope.
So
That's
yeah,
about it.
I think then that's that. Please, this is the fifth movie. I've lost the count by now. We are going to
Yeah,
do
we've done.
three, four movies more
Yeah.
about PIF, and then possibly like more movies and discussions after that. So yeah, please encourage us by liking, sharing, subscribing,
Yeah.
hearting, double
Leave a
hearting, triple
comment,
hearting.
actually. I'm interested to know, because Aniket posed the question and I feel like we didn't come to an answer. Do you know of any films in mainstream media that covered postpartum depression?
Yeah,
Share which ones you know of, and we'd love to watch them
yeah,
as well. So,
yeah.
yeah.
And feel free to tag your friends or like any family member or anyone who's going through their pregnancy and would like, sort of to talk about this experience and all that. I think one of the things which we are not doing till this point of time, like as we discuss and all that, we would also like to open the floor to the audience to, like, this, some of the characters might be much more closer to the audience than they are to us. Like, we talk about,
Yeah.
who are we to talk
Share
about these
your
things, right?
experiences.
So
Yeah.
share your experiences, share your thoughts, like take the conversation forward. I think that's the best thing that we can hope for. But yeah, I think on that note,
Absolutely.
let's close it.